us today, but we have a deputation, and I'd like to welcome Harrison, who will speak on behalf of Greater Otatahi regarding item 15, derelict buildings, issues and options.
Kia ora everyone, good to see you all again. So the general vibe of today's submission is going to be around the discussion you'll have today around the city vacant kind of differential and what you're going to do with going forward with that. We just want to kind of put on your radar and just have a wee chat about something along the lines of land value rating as a sort of thing that you might want to discuss in this context. So there's obviously the city has the city vacant differential, which is the rates multiplier for the vacant sites. And whilst that's gone a long way to tidying up the sites that were unseemly and quite frankly very under-maintained, it hasn't necessarily had the development impact we kind of thought it might. It hasn't encouraged development in the way we thought it would. A lot of sites have just simply tidied up to keep themselves out of that rates multiplier rather than actually doing anything. It's a bit frustrating. So, after the earthquakes, we all know the city lost an incredible amount of capital value basically overnight, and it's been quite difficult to regain that. And so the kind of thought we're having is that it's actually might be potentially an issue with the rating system, disincentivizing development by incentivizing people to remain on those sites as they are. It's quite limited in its ability to actually encourage development when the thing that's being rated is the thing you want developed. Whereas like for land, if you rate something or you tax something, and inevitably supply starts to be pushed down. That doesn't happen with land because you can't, unless you physically take that land and remove it from existence, it remains regardless of whether it's developed or not. And so it's just that we might be asking you to just consider as an option to look at land value rating. So it's allowed under the LGA, and other cities use it for theirs. So Nelson uses it for theirs, and it's kind of shown itself quite effective at dealing with land banking in a way by sort of removing that incentive to sit on a site. So we have a sort of a case study. So there are two sites in Cathedral Square. Both have about the same size, so between 0.08 and 0.1 hectares. Both have a capital value of just over 3 to 3.5 million. One is developed and one is not. So the one that is developed, you have $32.6 million worth of capital on that site. And so it's rated at 35 million. And the council receives just shy of $300,000 in rates every year from that site. The site next to it is undeveloped and therefore there's no capital development on top of it. So what you receive instead is $29,000. Now, essentially, if we factor in capital gains and the income from this site that it is gaining through being a car park, you're looking at this person is making about $100,000 a year, roughly, on the site for no improvement value and a little amenity to the city, and is also only paying $29,000 on a prime piece of inner city land that really could be used for a better purpose. In contrast, the neighbouring site has put in $32 million worth of capital development. They're making more, but they're also employing. They're adding to the amenity value of the city, and they're returning a higher rates base to the council. And so the question is that if this is the way that our rating system continues to look at things, it's almost like an incentive to not develop if you are okay just sitting on land. And so it's more that LVR better captures that value, or would better capture that value than the current rating system might in instances where it's an undeveloped site. And so it's kind of like the capital value rating doesn't quite capture that in the way that the city vacant differential kind of thought it might. And it sort of allows sites that might be exempt from that city vacant differential to continue existing in the way they do without necessarily any kind of incentive to develop. So like, for example, the Seagull Pit, which is exempt from the city vacant differential because technically it's considered a building, despite the fact if you were to walk down there today, and I cycle past there, I can see from Victoria Square to Margaret Mayhew. There's nothing on that site, but all of the sites on that site have either been improved or are exempt from the city vacant differential. It adds no amenity to the city. In fact, it's a bit of an amenity loss, and it sucks away to that part of that city. and it means that the northern side of the river is disconnected more from the arts precinct, which is not something I assume this council wants there to be a disconnect in the city from north to south. But the current system doesn't incentivise development on that site. And while I understand the mitigating circumstances of the site's use has just recently changed, it was still coming up 12 months ago that decision was made by the Catholic Church to leave that site. And as far as I'm aware, it still remains in a situation where no development is proposed. It's down to the point that even if we're talking about land value rating in this instance, the total value between 2019 and 2022 of unimproved land in the city grew by $1.5 billion. So from 2.5 to $4 billion under this kind of capital rating system. It hasn't led to new developments in the same way we thought it would. And it also could actually be an interesting draw card to look at in terms of an overall rating system. So an LVR system could potentially see a reduction in rates for your median Christchurch property by 6%. That's an average, but it would be most beneficial for low income areas that are currently paying higher capital rates on lower value land. It would enable council to better recover the value of public investment, and because it kind of also tends to increase the value of that land. And so if you put an investment in and the land value increases regardless of its development, you then get a better return on it through a land value rate rather than a capital rate. So we're not saying to go ahead and change the entire rating system of the council today, for that is an immense task of Herculean proportions. But in terms of the discussion you're going to have today around vacant sites and the impacts they could have, I think it is worth just putting that on the table, that there are other options for you to consider, and that they do have benefits that could be more appropriate than the current system that we're looking at. So, cool.
Okay, all done. Any questions, please? Right, Celeste, Tim?
Thank you for that. It's very interesting. So are you saying that that's been applied in Nelson, did you say?
I believe Nelson has a land value rating as their main rating system, yes.
Yeah.
So you have to choose one of the other under the LGA.
And you think that, like you're saying, has had a positive impact in terms of...
As far as I've seen with Nelson, yeah, it seems to have done quite well up there, and it was something that was also considered in Wellington as considering it as well at the moment, I think. But I don't know at what point they are on that.
And have you looked at any other? As part of that, have you looked at any other tools that would be useful in a Christchurch specific context?
I personally have. This is just as an organisation we've drawn this up, but I can get back to you on that if you want. Yeah.
Thanks.
Tim, please.
Following the earthquake, we found that a lot of the properties were owned by family trusts or investors. They weren't developers, which is a whole specialist area itself. And we've got the Harley Chambers, which is going to be a hotel. We've got Noah's being rebuilt as we speak. Not everything can be rebuilt as because everything's got to be paid for. So it's a huge amount of money to build something. Do you think the rates, the reason that it's slowed is because of the rate? One of the reasons is the rates, or is it the actual just the rebuild and progress of a city rebuilding? Because we had been told by everybody that's an expert saying, we're going to have 20,000 people in the central city, and then when you look at the reality, we've got 7 to maybe 9 if we're lucky, and it's cost a fortune to buy a place here.
I think the rating system. So I mean, capital rating has been a thing since Christchurch City amalgamated, and that was the decision made at the time. I think post-earthquake, there are a ton of mitigating factors, land condition and consents and heritage stuff, and that has slowed down some, like Harley Chambers slowed that down massively.
Yeah, absolutely, yep.
I think the continued ability to sort of land bank has slowed down on the overall trend. So there are some sites who are going ahead fast than others. There will be some sites that have had, the owners have had to wait for the capital to generate so they can actually build. But in sites where potentially the landowner does have the capital but is choosing to keep that land vacant, that would be probably that the rates multipliers could be an incentive for them to move forward with that faster. Because vacant land that is undeveloped is sort of a disamenity in the city.
Yeah.
And if we're talking about wanting 20,000 people, we need to be ensuring that we're incentivising going for the right kind of growth in the right places. And I would like to hope that rates can be an incentive towards that, especially if we were looking at a new system, that there would be a positive incentive towards that. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Cheers.
Awesome. Thank you.
Okay, now we've got some council minutes times 3.